Welcome to the Live Your Possible podcast, the show about sparking and discovering endless possibilities where we work, live, and play. A safe place where we can help you peel back the cover to what may be blocking you from being your most authentic and happiest self.
I am over the moon excited and honored to welcome today's guest to the show. Tony Martignetti is a trusted advisor, coach, experienced designer, author, podcast host, and speaker. He brings together over 25 years of business and management experience, formal training, and extreme curiosity to elevate leaders and equip them with the tools to navigate through change and unlock their true potential. He loves guiding people to find clarity in their lives so they are energized, fully present, and unstoppable. When leaders unlock their potential and lead from a place of inspired purpose, they impact and inspire everyone around them. He has dedicated himself to helping people live inspired lives. Before becoming the founder and chief inspiration officer of Inspired Purpose Coaching, he was a finance and strategy executive with experience working with some of the world's leading life science companies. Along his journey, he has also managed small businesses and ran a financial consulting company. Tony is the host of the Virtual Campfire podcast, which I'm a huge fan of, and the author of Climbing the Right Mountain, Navigating the Journey to an Inspired Life, which I'm excited to read. On today's show, Tony shares how he found his calling to overcome burnout and depression by looking for the signs and listening to the whispers. Also, as Tony prepares for his upcoming TED Talk, he talks about the importance of locating and turning on the light within ourselves and how to expand the possibilities sitting there right in front of us. Also, Tony dives in and reminisces into his childhood about his love for the arts and how this continues to influence how he inspires others with purpose. Well, welcome, Tony. I appreciate you joining me on the Live Your Possible podcast. And I'm excited to dive in to talk through your transformative career, how you spent 25 years in business and finance, and you moved over into being the chief inspiration officer. I can't believe it. I want to hear all about it. So welcome to the show, and let me know, when did you make that shift to be that inspiration officer?
Oh, first of all, I'll just start by saying thank you so much for having me on. I have been such a big fan of your work, and I'm just so thrilled to be in this space. Everything you do just really kind of inspires me. So that's big. And so I'll start with that. And now I'll say, how did I come into this space of being the chief inspiration officer, which I say is a title that I have to earn every day by how I show up, which is not easy. The way I got here is I really found this place in my life where I was not showing up in the best way. I was finding myself kind of stuck in a rut in the corporate world, continuing to go through a pattern of, doing the work and feeling like my fire was not lit any longer. Ooh. Yeah. So I had this moment where I decided that I needed to do something different. And there was two moments, I should say. One was when I was completely burnt out. I was working so hard, feeling like I was trying to be someone I was not. And that was feeling like I needed to be the smartest person in the room, the head of finance, and work super hard to be the best financial, officer in the room. And the reality is, I don't think it's ever really meant for that. It's just something that was programmed in my mind that this is who I was. And I just kept on working harder and harder, long hours, like really burning the candle at both ends. And I just felt like all of the color in my life was going to gray. I didn't really want to continue on. And I don't mean to start in such a downer note, but luckily the fact that I'm standing here today is a testament to the fact that there was a good story that ended this, ended up happening. So I had that dark moment where I just, finally figured out I can't continue this way because this is not a life. So I came out of that dark moment and started to inch my way forward with the hope of saying, I got to do something better for myself. I got to have a life that is more meaningful, more purposeful, and more aligned with who I am. The question is, who am I?
Right.
So I won't say that I discovered all that in the moment, but it started to ask more questions of myself and started to explore more. And that eventually I found myself in this room. And this is the second point that really revealed, the moment when I had to come out and do the real work. And that was when I was sitting in a boardroom at a biotech company that I was working at. And I decided, as I looked around the room, that this was not the work I wanted to be doing any longer. I was seeing the senior leadership in the room, and I was saying, wow, they really care only about protecting themselves, about their own image. That was the only thing on their mind. Everyone in the room was checked out, kind of doing their own thing. It was not a very inspiring situation. And I decided to get up and walk out. And I said to myself in that moment, I said, I'm going to leave this room, to change this room. And I didn't know how that was going to happen. I just knew it had to do with creating a sense of different ways of leading, of basically how leaders would lead, connected with who they are and how they inspire others. Long story, but
this is wonderful setup, Tony. There's so many questions that we're going to dig into. So way to lay it out up front.
All right.
This is perfect. How many years ago was that? Just to kind of set the framework.
6 years ago. Now.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations for making the change. I have this visual about this. Your colors disappeared, so it was gray. Yeah. That sounds morbid. Sorry that you went through that. So how did you see it? How did you notice it? Was it the boardroom conversation? Sometimes I feel like when we're so overwhelmed or we're down, depressed, burnt out, we just have this feeling we can't even lift ourselves up to look or be able to open up our eyes wide enough to say, I can do better. And like you said, inch by inch, but was there something that was just a trigger? And maybe it was the boardroom. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the reason why I explained it in like 2 moments is because I think if you're at that really, really dark point, you don't have the full view yet. So you need to go and entrance. It's like taking the steps to get to the place where you're really able to have the courage to go full all out and really make the brave moment happen. But, so I think that's also a lesson in there for people who are, looking to make big moves, is that like, okay, you don't have to go from 0 to 100, but you can go from 0 to maybe 50 and then 50 to 100 by first realizing, hey, how are you currently living? How is the situation you're in right now serving you? And do you want to live differently? Do you want something different to happen? And what is one step you can take that would make you feel differently? And that's the starting point. And then when I had that moment in the boardroom, that was the moment that said, okay, I think I've had enough. I've had a little bit of clarity. And I know that I need to start breaking patterns. This was a pattern that was like, I was starting to see things more clearly. I had the aperture of my camera had opened up just enough. And now I was starting to see a lot wider.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And just to kind of take things back, I love the fact that you connected with this idea of the grayness. I actually was an artist as a child. So I loved this connection to colors and, vibrancy of colors, and then going to gray and then the colors again. It's like you bring that sense of, contrast that comes from being in and out of color.
In and out's a pretty interesting way to think about it, and the ability that we can come in and out and that we have those opportunities. And just for everybody listening, everybody, if we're down or thinking about things or questioning if we're worth things or if we're capable of things, I think Tony would agree that we're all deserving, we're all worthy, and it's, we all can change. And we're born a certain way that we're continuously improving and capable. And we both believe in possibilities are available for everyone. So I think you agree with that, Tony.
Yeah. I want to throw this out here, which I think you'll love. I've been playing with this term called, I want to be a possibilitarian, which is like, a way for us to be living and operating in the world where we say like, we see possibilities everywhere. Yeah. So
I love it. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean there are days where you might not see them as clearly. They're there waiting to be noticed. They're waiting to be taken care of, to be part of our lives. And there are things that we see every day. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, the signs and the signals and what we've seen. So you talk about your childhood being an artist. I mean, that's fun. And then you went into finance. I don't know what happened in between. Is finance, was that looked at as a vibrant set of colors? And I'm not picking on finance because I grew up in finance. I'm a CPA, and I could relate to a lot of things you're talking about. And I use bright pink as my brand color for everything I'm doing. So I believe in everything you're saying. I'm just curious, what happened to the painting, the ability to create in that way? Granted, I understand you can create a lot of things in finance. Just curious about the shift.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And I think there's a sense of like, there's a lot of different steps along the way that got me to where I ended up along the path. And one of the things that I originally was going to get into was architecture. When I was doing art as a young adult, a young child, I should say, I was celebrated. I was winning awards. I was seen as someone who had potential to do something with it. But there was also a lot of well-meaning adults who would say, hey, like, you should really think about a career that's going to make you money. And, so you can live. You don't want to be living on the streets. And so the first thing that came to mind at that point, as I was shifting gears from being an architect, was, I'll go to med school, because that made complete sense, right? You go from being an artist to going into medical school. But that's what I did. I actually went from the arts into sciences and then eventually into business. And that really kind of tells a story of a person who is really this, has this innate curiosity about wanting to know everything about everything and realizing you can't. The shift into finance was really about realizing that I wanted to be able to know the language of business. And finance, I saw as being the language of business. It's the way that everything gets done. It's the underlying, like, architecture, if you will, of how the world of business gets operated. And it served me well for many years. But what was missing for me was this connection to the fact that I wanted to be able to do it in a way that connected to these things that had me creating with people. And that was missing for me.
Yeah, no, that's a good connection. And I think I've read in some of your bios and other pieces you've written, because you have many informative, wonderful articles on your website, which we'll certainly add a link to, about leadership and about how you make connections. And it's important to make connections as a finance leader. You have a different perspective as a finance leader. You can connect the dots with life and art and sciences in a different way. You see the value in it, and you try to encourage people to see more on that. And you're doing that in every role that you participate in. And I appreciate you talking about architecture too and art, because my daughter is a really good artist. Yeah. And she's actually talking about being an architect, which I'm thinking that's wonderful. Like, stay with it. Don't give up. And I do fear that sometimes we do put too much on our kids about, hey, you're not creative. Hey, you're not a good artist. Like, I was told those things. Yeah. And granted, I'm a stick figure kind of drawer kind of person, yet it's still beautiful. Yeah. It's still creative. We're creating things all the time. So I feel like our world is teaching us in a lot of ways. It's divisive. It's right or wrong, or 0 or 1. Yet the creativity is in between. The possibilities are endless if we start to think about what if. And I love how you think about curiosity. And I'd love to learn more. How do you use curiosity in your day? Like, how do you keep that alive so you're not going too far? Like you said, you could learn about so many things. Yeah. How do you use it today to bring out the beauty that you want to see in the world?
Yeah, I love this question, because I've been really leaning into this idea of like the shiny object syndrome, which is, sometimes you can be overly curious, right? Yeah. You can be so curious that it can have you going in too many different directions, and it can feel like you're just constantly wobbling around in the world and, moving from one thing to the next and not finishing one thing. And I think the key thing is to have the curiosity to stay with something long enough that you see it through and see, what is this thing that I'm working with? Am I allowing to go deeper, or am I going deep enough with the thing that I'm staying with? And that also is important for me in the work that I do, because I want to be curious about the person who's in front of me and find out more about what's really important for them and what's really meaningful to them. And if I am so curious that I get distracted by the next thing that shows up, it's hard for me to stay in the zone with that person. So that's the challenge and tribulations of being curious. Is you can have many interests, and that's fantastic, but it's also challenging to go deep with curiosity.
Yeah, that's fascinating. How do you connect it back, or what do you do to keep it connected so you don't go too far, or it's building on something you're trying to either work with a client, or maybe you're doing more painting. You're painting like a 5-year-old, like Pablo Picasso always used to say, right? He said he did his best work as a child, and the rest of his career he was trying to paint like a 5-year-old. And I feel like you're doing that today. Like, so how do you kind of tie that back? How do you tie your curiosity to what's going to keep you with the realm of possibilities in reality today?
Well, I think the starting point is we are so wired with, as a society to go fast, right? And that fastness is not serving us in terms of being able to A, going deeper, and B, going wider. If we're going so fast, we're just touching things on the surface. We're just moving. You're like, okay, done, move forward. Okay, done, move forward.
Yeah.
And in some things, sure, in context of like, it's good enough, move on. I get that. But if it's important to you, then you should linger a little longer and say, okay, well, I need to figure out what else is possible here. What else do I need to know in this particular, lane that I'm in that I want to dig into? And by going slowing things down, you're able to kind of stay with it a little longer. I think about this from context of, I was recently interviewing a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Utley, who's the author of Idea Flow, and how we are so quick to take the first idea that shows up and then say, we've got it, let's go move forward. But we have to actually have ideas, a flow of ideas, and then find through that flow of ideas, which one's the best ideas. We have to kind of be okay with sitting with the problem a little longer and allow that to be, something we're comfortable with. We're so impatient as a society and as a people in general. We want to move quick. We can't. We got to slow it down. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think in the world of these Zoom calls and online calls, in the business sector with meetings after meetings, I remember going from one meeting, as I'm hanging up, I'm practically hitting the next one. And I'm just sitting in these meetings online. And I'm sure a lot of people could relate that are listening. Right.
Yeah.
And it's
2 phones.
And it's fascinating. What are we learning? What are we doing? Are we driving that level of curiosity? Are we making those connections? Are we doing the most important things today? Are we doing what we used to do because that's what we did or we were told to do? And I feel like there's elements, at least I could say for me, in my career, I did go into a similar path, down a similar path with accounting. Like that was the center of business and that was practical. And then I learned how to help lead and to help companies do right by their financials and do the right things about investing. That was all fun, but I learned it was really about the people that I got excited about. And I think I could see this in you, like you're trying to bring out the best potential in people. You're trying to get people to be fulfilled. You're trying to get leaders to light up. And there's something about the light up component that really stands out for me, because there's one of the articles that you and I might have talked about this on your show that you have sent over. It's about a box. Can you talk about that article or that story? You know what I'm referring to?
I know exactly what you're referring to. And I have a confession to make, and this is a little bit taboo, but I'll say it. So this box, the illuminated box, it actually is inspired by this piece of art that is here locally in Boston area. It's in the Peabody Essex Museum by an artist of Pakistani descent, and it's called "All the Flowers Are for Me." That's the name of the piece of art. It's a structure. It's a metal box that has a light inside. And the reason why it's taboo is because I'm on the verge of getting a new tattoo, and the tattoo is going to be of this metal box, and it's going to have this inscription on the outside that says that when you light the fire and hold on a second here, I'm going to look it up just because I want to make sure I get the actual language I was going to use in this. Just bear with me a second.
I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, illuminating the path forward starts by sparking the fire within. Illuminating the path forward starts by sparking the fire within. I've never actually said that to anybody yet, so that's the first reveal, and the tattoo will be coming. I'm going to be getting it soon.
See it too, so make sure you send a picture if you're okay with that, and if that's not taboo. Yet at the same time, as you know, my purpose changed at one point to see the light in other people. So we share that connection because there is a light inside of all of us. waiting to unleash, waiting to come out filled with creativity, with love, with joy, whatever it is that's important to each of us. And I love that you have that article out there, because I think if I could quote it, you even make a point on there about how what makes you sad is that most people are just living out their lives as enclosed boxes, keeping their light hidden inside. And yet, when we're ready to let our light shine through, it creates art and beauty that is completely unique to us. And you also go on to say in the article about how you try to create this light, or at least turn the light back on with your clients so they can shine brightly. And just talking through it, like as a leader or someone in the community that's shining brightly, doesn't that attract people? Doesn't that excite people? Does that bring out the best in people? What's your experience
100%.
about that, what you're seeing?
I think what this actually models is that way of like, if you want people to show up differently, you have to show up differently. If you want to have other people shine their light brighter, you have to be the one who can do the same. And I think that's where change starts with yourself, right? And oftentimes when I talk to people and they say, oh, like, the environment I'm in is just really toxic, or you can't get anything done, or I can't seem to deal with these situations at work. Or they'll say something, that's just the way it is around here. And I'll be like, well, what would happen if you're the one who can spark that change? Yeah. You're the one who is maybe going to be the start of something bigger. And, if you don't, what happens is you stay like a dark box. You're not lit up. And that's not serving anybody. It's most of all yourself.
Yeah, it's limiting what's possible for sure. And the picture, and I'll put a link to that article to your website. I think it's a great one, because there's two pictures on there. One picture is with the light off, and it's just sitting there. And I kind of equate that to earlier parts of my career where I was a bit uptight, just worried about the outcomes and the numbers. And then you turn on the light, and it's like, whoa. Yeah. And the walls are filled with beauty because we're lit up, and how we're sharing the safety with others to say, you can do this too. And then they light up and it starts popping. And then next thing you know, everybody's contributing in different ways. So back to your example, how are people going to contribute and change culture, or to make things better? Or if the leader's not willing to do that, or is not willing to accept it, or even make it safe enough for folks to do that. So people's lights are going to stay off, and we're going to be those hanging boxes kind of sitting around in the offices, or online. Like we're sitting in a box right now, virtually. Yeah. I think we're trying to light up the world a little bit differently.
And Darren, I have to be honest with you. You triggered something in me, because this is what you do in a good way. Is I'm doing a TED Talk this summer, and it has to do with connections, making deeper connections at work. And I never made the connection right now in this moment until this moment about how when you're showing up fully with your light on as a fully illuminated box, you're actually able to create deeper connections in the workplace. And it's not about bringing in all these things about it doesn't have to be forced, but it's about just being more authentically you and sharing little parts about you that you don't normally share. That makes a big difference to the people around you, because then it gives them permission, and it gives them a desire to want to do the same to you. And that's what my talk's generally about. It's called Don't Check Yourself at the Door. And I never thought the two were connected, but now I see they actually are connected. So thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah, you're welcome. It's two firsts on the show. I love it. We got the tattoo phrase and then this. So I look forward to watching that. That's going to be exciting, because not only will you light up the room, I think you'll light up the audiences to think, within it, right? It starts within us. And as we light up, we truly are this lighthouse for others, that we help to illuminate what's around. It's kind of like that hanging box does. It shines the light elsewhere for folks to step in differently. And a lot of us want to go to work as our full selves, or be fully authentic. And it doesn't mean just telling everybody what's on our mind, because that's not always the healthiest thing. So when you talk about authenticity and being your authentic selves, how would you define that a little bit more? And then what are a couple steps you would encourage folks? I know you talked about small steps, but what would you encourage some folks to start thinking about just to practice being authentic? Yeah. I know it sounds silly, yet we've been trained in such a way that like your talk is kind of saying, we do check ourselves at the door. We're not our full selves.
Yeah. And I don't want to give my whole talk away because I do, there's a certain things about, they want to make sure that it's in the moment and it's being revealed
Tony, I'm trying to get it out. I'm trying to get it out of you.
I know you are, but I will share, like, it's really looking at the things that, that you think are like, oh, no big deal. Like, we think that they make us maybe weird or different in a way that is maybe not, we don't think is special, but we may think of a thing like a hobby that we do that we can explore and then say, hey, what are some things that I do on the weekend that people would never even guess? And sharing that little quirky thing might have someone say like, oh my gosh, I never knew you did that. That's so cool. And that little opening up can change the game. I'll use one example, and this is not an example for my talk, but I had done a workshop with this organization, and the CEO, he plays the electric bagpipes. Never even knew that existed, but he had shared that with the people he worked with, and they were like, oh my gosh, like, we have to hear this. You have to bring it to work. We want to hear you play. And he played, and like, he had people in tears because he was so good. But it was also this thing of like them seeing him truly in his full form, in his passion, playing something that people had never even experienced before. And it opened them up to something bigger than they ever thought they could. It was really a cathartic moment for everyone in the room. So for me, being there and having him open up his aperture just a little bit changed things, and it had him showing up differently going forward. So
that's touching. It's like humanity's back a little bit. It's like that people saw that person as a human being. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it didn't take a lot. And it didn't take him having to reveal some deep, dark secret. It was just a little thing that, moved the needle for him and allowed him to connect deeper with the people around him. So think about those little hobbies or things that you think make you weird. The things that make you weird might actually make you someone who other people would say, wow, you're fascinating. And I love that about you.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. And I believe we're all perfectly unique. So we all have our special adventure or thing we like to do, hobby or our differences. It's something that I've had to learn along the way, that differences, that's really the power that we all can actually play around with, because I think it gives us a chance. It gives humanity a chance to learn about each other, to be curious, to embrace what's different and what's wonderful about somebody else. Because I think when we do that, I do think we actually all grow, and that's a form of inclusion. That's a form of curiosity. It's a form of love. It's genuine care. Whatever buzzword you want to talk about, it's just being human. It's just being kind. It's being welcoming and accepting of each other.
Yeah. I mean, just what I described a minute ago is that's the small micro step, but think about the deeper moments that go in and you think about those things like people not revealing the fact that they have, family, they have kids because they're afraid of being judged for having to, step away from work because they need to take care of their, their kids because whatever. I mean, there's things that people hide all the time because they're afraid of being judged. Those are the bigger things. But if we can start small and start to open up ourselves, then we start to see that there's a bigger, things we can open up to. And then we start to see each other at a bigger level. That's what
I think we love that. And I think we could all step in today, tomorrow, the next day with one small thing just to try it out at home in the community and share something, because I do think it'll create a ripple effect. I do. And I love that you talk about opening up a little bit. And I just have to call out my icon, this one-eyed smile, this Italian ice story that I'll put a link to it. I won't get into it. Yet it is about pulling back. It's looking inside. It's seeing what's within us. It's the joy. It's the creativity, the things that I pushed away in my life and my career that I've allowed to kind of come to the surface again. And I've started to kind of light up in different ways. So then I feel like as I'm stepping out, being vulnerable, being courageous, being my unique self, it brings out the best in other people. Hence why I guess why we're here, Tony. And I applaud everything you're doing. I think it's quite amazing. And I'd love to learn a little bit about, if you don't mind, sharing about how you went through your journey, because I have a feeling the work you're doing with Inspired Purpose Coaching and the techniques and the guides that you have on your website, a lot of these might have been some practices you might have learned along the way. And maybe I'm just guessing at that. Yet I'm wondering if if some of the stories that you're talking about led you to develop these wonderful modules, and maybe you could just walk us through something that would be helpful for one of the listeners to understand, hey, here are some steps, here are some ways that you could start to work on, and then connect back with you, Tony, with getting into this a little bit more deeply. But I just love to know, maybe use your story, because I love to talk about the theory with the real example.
Yeah, no, I love this. So first of all, I would say that we are the work, right? We all are. I mean, everything we learn, everything we take in is part of our own body of work, but then we bring out into the world we live in. Whether you're in finance, you're a doctor, the things that we're experiencing become part of the body of work that we then bring out into the world. And the same thing is true for me. So everything that I do is part of my toolbox, if you will, and one that I've truly loved sharing with people, because it's something that for me I needed to learn, was this thing that I've shared with countless people, is this idea of expand your vision and narrow your focus. Because the whole idea, let me kind of walk you through it real quick, is that oftentimes we get stuck in patterns and we think, okay, well, this is how I need to navigate. This is the path I'm on. And we get stuck in that because we only see what's in front of us, right? But what we need to do sometimes is we need to expand our vision, see new possibilities. And by doing that, although it seems like maybe you get overwhelmed because you have too many options, but you need to see what is available. And by doing that expansion, you're really connecting to your own inspiration too. You're seeing, well, what inspires me as I look around here? What's the thing that is creating a spark for me that I might want to connect with? I mean, I don't have to have it like be as clear as day as to say, oh, I see over here that I could become a rock and roll singer of a band, in a band. Sure, that's exciting, but doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be, an overnight thing. But if it is something that is real for you, then at least hey, I want to put that as an option. I want to put that in my toolbox, in my shopping cart, if you will. But once you get those options available to you, even if it means simple things, you want to think about, how can I narrow it down and create focus? Because if you don't have that focus, then what happens is you'll just stay there in that I collected a bunch of knowledge. Now what? You have to take action, right? So the narrow your focus is about, what is the thing that I need to do now that will put me in trajectory of creating something? What imperfect action am I willing to take to move forward? So expand your vision, narrow your focus is like a tool that allows you to be able to see the world differently that you're currently living in.
It's a great example, and I imagine your tools and guides gets into the details of that too, that folks could play around with. And what happens if I'm in a place where I'm really, really stuck? And as you talked about earlier for yourself, right? You're in burnout mode. You're seeing gray, and how do I get myself even just to start to look expansively about my vision? How do I even start that? What are a couple of things that could help pull me out of that? Even though it's going to be a toggling. For a bit, I imagine. How can someone get to that point? The
first thing you can do is first of all, realize you're not alone. There are other people out there who are going through the same thing you're dealing with. You want to make sure. What happens in those moments often is we feel like we're the only one experiencing that experience, and that we're some oddball out there trying to go through these emotions on our own. We have to connect to people. Connection is important. So the first thing you can do is find somebody you can talk to, a loved one, anybody who sees you, and ask them, hey, what do you think? Here's what I'm going through. What are your thoughts about what I'm experiencing? And just having someone else to read back to you what they see is helpful, because it'll help you see that glimmer of hope that you may be missing, right?
It's good. I'm sure they could reach out to either one of us too if they're in a pinch and looking for an idea.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes, some possibilitarians. We're gonna, get some possibilitarians out there.
I love it. I love it. And just making connections with folks. I'm hoping people are reflecting a bit about where they are. Again, not to beat ourselves up or to question why and those type of things, because I do believe in looking forward And I think about growth mindsets quite a bit. And how do we actually get to a possible mindset? Hence the podcast, Live Your Possible, because I do feel like we can really unearth and really tap into many, many different things. But it does take the small steps. And I love how you talk about the small steps, and not only here, but I know in your work, in your book, and your guides as well. So it's very helpful. In your book, I imagine, I'm looking forward to dive into that. It's when you talk about climbing, the right mountain. That's something that I think was personal for you. Is that something that you kind of went into, where you climbing the right mountain, going into finance, and then you had to climb the other mountain? And I also think I heard you actually went on an adventure recently to climb a different mountain too. So I'd love to hear about all that.
Yes, you are correct. So yes, climbing the right mountain was really a story. There's some stories in there about climbing mountains, but it's really about my journey and other people's journeys about how they define success based on, societal norms of what we think success looks like. And then we realize when we get to the top of that mountain that maybe this is not the mountain I wanted to climb, and I'm ready to do something different. I want to choose a different path. Now, this is not about, go run out and start your own company or do something completely different. Maybe it's even just changing the way you look at what you're currently doing and just changing your perspective on the climb you're on. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to jump to a different climb. It just means that you have to choose how you're climbing. And that's really the perspective we need to change. And yes, in terms of climbing mountains, after the book was published, about a year later, I actually climbed Kilimanjaro, which was quite an undertaking. I think the lead up to it was more of the journey than anything else. It was, the excitement, the preparation, and just the conversations I've had with people along the way about, hey, I've climbed, let me tell you what I think. And there was so many cool things that have happened since deciding to do it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is that something that you always dreamed to do, or did that evolve to get? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was ironic that I was asked the question. And the person who asked me is Dory Clark, actually my coach. She actually asked me, she's like, well, what's the next thing? What are you going to do next? And I'm like, I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro. And as soon as I said it, I was like, that is happening now. It was like that moment that as soon as it came out of my mouth, the next day I went online and started planning it out. And that's how it got created. And also, I think that's a testament to how things get done, is that you first have to create it in your mind and saying, this is what I want, started visualizing it, and then take the steps and prepare for it. Right.
And maybe you've already answered this, Tony. What is inspiring you these days?
Oh, well, first of all, I would say the conversations I have with people who really get it and who understand that it's not just about, continuing to come to work and, crank out more and more and more and more, but it's about going deeper. That's what's inspiring me most. I'm all about deeper connection these days. The more I can get, the better, because I feel like we went through a period of not having that. And I was just as much desiring it as anyone else. So that's what's inspiring me most. And besides that, I think the one thing that I'm inspired by is travel. And so I'm really looking forward to getting out and having some more adventures.
That's wonderful. And how are you keeping in touch with your passion from childhood as far as art, museums, architecture? Is that still alive in you as well?
100%. Yeah. In fact, I would say more so because, like I said, I kindled that spark again. And my wife actually, for my birthday, my most recent birthday, which was in January, she got me two things. Number one, she got me a session with doing some metal work, which I'm thrilled about, creating art in metal work. I can't wait. And she got me a pottery class, which I love that too, because I've never done that before. And I'm looking forward to digging into that. And I like to do glass blowing and painting. So I'm still doing that type of stuff. So yeah, I engage with it. In fact, one of the things that I've recently done is I've decided to create a program to get people immersed in the arts through coaching. So workshops that I call it Seeing Things Differently, which is really powerful.
I'm in. When do we start? Anyway, I agree with that approach for many, many, many reasons. One is to enjoy, to embrace, and to connect. And you're making connections on so many levels there. I also feel like there's a level of humility that we gain from trying things that, hey, we're not the expert. Like I tried to learn guitar, for example. I'm terrible, yet I enjoy it to the extent that I play it. What I appreciate more is just music. I imagine going through what you're talking about is appreciating the arts differently. Like I appreciate art much differently watching it through my daughter's eyes. And my son's too. He's going through it. He just has a different approach similar to mine. But he's passionate about it. And I want to embrace that. I want to feed that because you never know.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. If you're sitting on, if you have two kids who are the future Mozart and, who knows, Eddie Van Halen, who knows, but you want to make sure that you don't let that get squandered. I don't want to leave on a downer note, but there's this book by Todd Henry many years ago. He wrote a book called Die Empty. And what I love about this concept is this sense of, the most valuable pieces of property in the world are cemeteries, because that's where all these brilliant people have let their ideas go to die because they never let their song be sung or their ideas be put out in the world. And that's why it's so valuable, because unfortunately they went to the grave without letting it all happen. So I think that's one of the things that, apropos to what we're saying right now, the possibilities. If you have a possibility inside of you, you have to let it out, because not only are you not serving yourself, but you're not serving all of us. And that's selfish. So
that's selfish. That's pretty good. And then tying back this morbid thought, it's a gray matter being lost and the lost colors. Yeah. The idea not being shared is selfish. It's fascinating. I also agree with you. It doesn't go anywhere. And you talk about vibrancy, and we're living in a vibrant world, and these ideas will make it brighter. It'll make it shine in a different way. And why not? Why not try it out? Share it with somebody, see what they think. Run it by Tony, see what he thinks. He'll help you run it through the whole guide in the process. I'm here to help too. Tony, just a fun question before we wrap up. And I also want to hear if there's anything else you want to share with the audience. The fun question is around just your superpower. I have a couple of words in my mind about you after talking with you today, and there's not a wrong answer. Just curious where you're feeling for you today. Do you feel like you have a superpower, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah. And this is an interesting question because, this was not something that I realized I had until people reflected it back to me. And I have what's called grounded energy. And grounded energy to me, as it's been explained to me, is the sense of like staying calm in the chaos and being able to not freak out when things go wrong, but allow myself to just stay in a place of letting people stay calm in that moment and seeing things in that moment that allow us to move forward powerfully. So yeah, I know it sounds kind of weird, but being grounded has been the superpower that has been identified for me. I can relate to that, and everybody needs you, Tony, because in the world we live in, we need to stay calm with the things that go on. Obviously, we've all seen in the world, and it's expanding in different ways. We just got to keep ourselves grounded in presence and keeping our thoughts more positive and what could be. And I think your sense of curiosity and how you think of things, you think about what is possible in a good way. What could this be? What can we do about it? How do we move forward? Without just blowing past the fact that we have to recognize that there is darkness, there are down days, and there are moments where you've expressed earlier about being burnt down or depressed, and there are ways for us to find the light in all of that. And you're doing that every single day. And I see your superpower as living with wonderment. There's something that's transcendent about you, that you just see things differently. And maybe that's what's keeping you grounded, filled with energy, as you talk about, is that you see things that we're not taking the time to look at. And I appreciate you for doing that and sharing your wisdom and the beauty that you're bringing out to the world, with your art, with your creative mind, your curious mind, and the love that you're giving to your clients and everybody in the world. And I admire what you're doing. And I appreciate
everything that you're giving back, you're paying it forward in what you're doing. And before we sign off, I'd love to hear if there's anything else you want to share with the audience that is on your mind based on the conversation we just had to help them step away from this conversation and get into that level of action mode or whatever is on your minds.
Yeah, I first of all, I want to say this has been such a great conversation, and Darren, Nick, you're really good at this. I think you found yourself in a great place. I've really enjoyed this conversation, but I want to leave the audience with something that was shared to me and has been sitting with me for a while now, and I just love it. It's a question, and the question is, in this moment, like, what is whispering to you that needs to be heard louder? And I love this question because there's these things that we just don't stay silent enough to hear. But when we listen to them, it could be something that's like the next chapter of our lives or the next thing that we should be focusing on, but we're afraid to listen to that whisper. So what is whispering to you?
I have chills, and we're going to end on that moment and that question. That's fascinating. Thanks for your comment earlier, Tony. And it's a pleasure having you on the show. And I have a feeling we'll be back together at some point, talking somewhere live, hopefully, or maybe back on your show, or you never know. Looking forward to your TED Talk and talking with you soon. Thanks again. I am energized. Tony is a guiding light and a great example of discovering what is possible when we connect with open-minded curiosity and belief in a greater purpose. He has a superpower that he refers to as grounded energy, and I believe is filled with wonderment and awe, where he is helping us to stay calm and find meaning in our chaotic world. A few ideas to consider practicing in our day from our show today are as follows. First thing, listen to the whispers or signs showing up for you. Notice what is most meaningful. Like for me, the one-eyed smile, which is on my logo here, is something I see in nature all the time. Other people are sharing this one-eyed smile, stopping them in their tracks. And it has me pausing to learn or embrace what is that learning in that moment. Other people are sharing with me, they see hearts or pennies or red cardinals or bunnies or feathers. They see these things that stops them to think, what does this mean for me? And to listen to the whisper. Or it could be something in their head or their mind they want to share that connects to a greater purpose or meaning for all of you. So take a moment today and every day. Is there a sign that we should stop and pause and look for the lesson? Secondly, consider how you show up at home, in the community, or at work. Are you bringing your authentic self? Tony shares how when we do this, it makes people around us more open to doing the same and contributing in a more meaningful way, which really, truly lights us all up. So slow down today and pause to reflect in meetings or discussions to see how you are showing up. Take small steps, different steps, to be your best authentic self and explore how people change as you reconnect to being you, and keep doing more. Take the small steps. Lastly, Tony encourages us to bring our ideas out in the world and not be selfish and keep it to ourselves, as it will not only enrich us, it likely will make our world a bit brighter when we do. So that's it for now. Thank you for listening to the show. Remember, you are possible every single day. Take the small steps from today and turn up the light in you that sparks your happy, authentic self, and live your possible.
That's all for today's episode. If you liked the show, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Live Your Possible dares to unlock your fullest potential and become an avenue for others to do the same. Join the community by visiting ignitehappy.com. It's time to discover endless possibilities with equal opportunity for all. See you again next week for more insights on how you can live your possible.